One way that we could kind of get our arms around this problem is to make the companies that are profiting from this gas exploration responsible, financially responsible for the environmental damage that they commit. Is that a fair summation? Okay. And I think that's absolutely appropriate. There's a lot of things ahead of that before we even get to that point here in New York. And contrary to the premise of the first question, I do not believe that every state government is owned by the oil companies. I think oil and gas companies have a great deal of influence in state governments, and I think that some states have allowed themselves to become sort of mouthpieces or the tools of those companies, but I think New York is not headed in that direction. One of the ways we know that for sure is that the person who was responsible for promulgating the regulations basically gave up his job because he said he couldn't do it under the circumstances that were cited by Josh in this film, Pete Granis. Pete sounded the alarm a couple of 3 weeks ago. And he said, we can't function in New York State. We can't do the things we're charged to do with any more cuts to our agency. And where the state of Pennsylvania was talking about a cut of a couple of hundred people, New York State has seen a devastation of the Department of Environmental Conservation, about 850 people so far, about 25% of its workforce, and they are now facing still another 150 layoffs. And here's the other aspect of that, of what's happened to the DEC. The best and the brightest have left. The people with the most experience, the people who were able to take the early retirement programs and who realized that staying behind would render them incapable of doing the job that they were charged with doing, was another reason that many of them left. So I'm not accepting the premise of the first question. There are still good people in government who want to do the right thing. Pete was in the middle of examining 13,000 different separate comments on fracking, and he was taking his darn sweet time about coming up with regulations before it happened. As a matter of fact, there was a bill that was passed in the Senate last spring, has not yet been passed in the Assembly. Probably by the time it passes in the Assembly, the period of time that it applies to will have been passed. It was Bob Sweeney's moratorium, and it was a moratorium also passed in the Senate that would extend a moratorium to next May. There's a different bill that's making its way through the House right now, and we hope that it gains some traction in the Senate. And it says we should have a moratorium on any drill permits in New York State unless and until the EPA completes a full study of the impact. So that's a Steve Engelbright bill, and I have the number written down in my notes, but without pulling them out of my pocket and getting my glasses, there's a problem. But I want to address the very point that you're raising. The exemption of oil and gas drilling from the Clean Water Act, from the Clean Water Act that has been around for 40 years, the inability to formulate regulations, and then even if we had, let's just roll back and say we would have that. And by the way, the EPA rules and regulations, the federal regulations for clean water, are tools that are used by the State Department. Or what we heard about in this film tonight was that even with good regulation, we're not properly staffed, and we can't ensure that we will be properly staffed. So that's the third part of the problem. What we need to do is to make sure that if and when regs are put in place at the federal level and at the state level, those issues of liability are perfectly clear, and that there are no loopholes to that we don't have to wait 40 years or 50 years after PCBs have been dumped in the Hudson to finally get the company that dumped them there to start taking them back out. We need to have immediate responses. I can go on and on about toxic wastes producers in New York State who have 200 and 300 year cleanup plans. That's their cleanup plan. And the point that I'm trying to get at with those folks is that's not really a cleanup plan. That's just the natural occurring, well, who knows what's going to happen 150 years after we're dead, but that's not really a cleanup plan. And those folks have booked that expense at maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars a year instead of the literally tens of millions of dollars that it's costing the environment. And what I'm talking about right now is an environmental site here in Ulster County, another one in Broome County, and one or two others across the state. So yes, making polluters pay for when they pollute is a key way of keeping people from polluting.
With everything you just said, I'm just not sure.
Okay, let me. Can we keep them out of New York? I hope we can keep irresponsible developers and exploiters of anything out of New York, and I hope that our regs are written that way. But I want to also take this moment, and I'll get to you, but I want to take this moment to point out to the fact that the lights that are burning in this building, that the heat that's being used in this building, there is a 3 out of 5 chance that that's being powered with natural gas in New York State. 3 out of 5. About 60% of our energy comes from natural gas. And we're producing about 5% of our natural gas in New York State. That means we're getting 55% of our power from natural gas in other places. We are getting it from places like Dimock, Pennsylvania, like Dish, Texas, like Louisiana, like Colorado. And it's being sent across pipelines. And these places are not responsibly regulating natural gas exploration and natural gas extraction. And if there was a way to do it responsibly, I would like New York to show how to do it. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we can be there yet. I think there are far too many hurdles, and I just don't see it anytime in the foreseeable future.